Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 2 of Dirtmasters, the review series where I'm evaluating the best and worst points of each real rally car that features on Gran Turismo 6. So in this episode, as you can see, we'll be reviewing the 2008 Spec Suzuki SX4 WRC. Visually, this car has the right look to it. It's a very purposeful and competitive looking car, relatively short wheelbase and kind of a dumpy appearance, which you'd probably think would make it pretty nimble around tight corners and tight tracks. But let's go to the track and see if that's the case. So first of all, of course, we have our city track, which is at London. So how does this car fare here with its relatively tall body but short wheelbase? Well, for its straight line performance as far as acceleration, I'm going to give it a 3. Because it's basically just a run-of-the-mill WRC car, so the acceleration isn't bad, but it's not amazingly good either. It's just like the average WRC car. For its brakes, I'm going to give it a 5, because they are very, very good. They do a good job of scrubbing off the car's speed. For its low-speed handling as well, I'm going to give it a 5, because it's got a great turn-in thanks to that short wheelbase, and it can cope with very tight right-angle corners, which is great for a city track. So overall, for city tracks, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, because although it's not perfect, it is very good. So now let's see how it handles a twisty country track. Now obviously a track such as this on Nordwand Road track does offer quite a different requirement of the car than a city track. The corners are much more high speed, there are longer straight sections, and it involves more of your high-speed handling. So how does this car cope on this kind of track? Well, on some of the corners it's pretty good, but overall I would say it doesn't feel that comfortable here. The short wheelbase works not so much to your advantage on the higher speed corners. It actually gets a little bit of understeer, which is surprising from a short wheelbase car. So for high-speed handling, I'm only going to give it a 4 out of 5, because it's definitely not as good as its low-speed, nimble handling for tight corners. For top-end performance, which is more of use on a track like this, again I'm going to give it a 3, because it's just your average WRC car. It's not amazingly good, but it's definitely not bad either. So overall, for country tracks such as this, I'm going to give it a 4, again like with city tracks, because it's definitely not bad, it has good handling, but it's not quite as quick as some of its main rivals. So now let's see what it's like on a dirt track. So here we are on the track which is this car's main purpose, a dirt gravel track. So how does it perform on this type of track? Because at the end of the day, this is the most important category for this car to perform well on. Well, it's okay, to be honest. It's not as good as I was hoping it would be, because it's a great looking car. It looks the part, it's got the short wheelbase, the loud colour, and it looks like it would be a really competitive car. Kind of in the same vein as my personal favourite WRC car of all time, the Skoda Fabia WRC. But unfortunately, whereas the Skoda has that perfect weight balance that you can shift around corners, the Suzuki, although being four-wheel drive, does kind of retain some of that front-wheel drive understeer. So for dirt tracks, unfortunately, I'm only going to give it a 4. Because although it's definitely not a bad car, it's not quite as good as I hoped it would be. And it's not as good as it looks. Now for drivability, I am going to give it a 5. Because although it's not as quick as I'd hoped it to be, it is still very easy to get a hang of this car and easy to drive it quick. And it's a relatively forgiving car, as most of the WRC cars are, considering that they do have less power than most of the hardcore old school rally cars. So that's it for our dirt track. Now let's see finally how it performs on a snow track. Now, as we said before in episode 1 of this series, snow tracks offer a completely different challenge to dirt tracks. They require much more of a flow from corner to corner than a dirt track, which can sometimes be more of a start and stop affair between brakes and acceleration. And that is actually the problem for this car, because the one thing that this car is not good at is keeping a flow. Now, it may look like it's doing a pretty good lap, but the amount of understeer that I was experiencing from this car on a snow track was really surprising, unfortunately. It was not good at all. Now, it did still put in a decent lap, and it wasn't undrivable, far from it. So I am still going to give it a 4 out of 5 for snow tracks, because it can give you a good lap. But the amount of understeer that this car has on a snow track does make keeping that flow going a lot more difficult. So that's it for our track and dirt and snow testing of the car. Now let's go back to the garage for a roundup of its best and worst points. So overall, the SX4 WRC definitely isn't a bad car. I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea from this review. If you're getting the impression that I hate this car, then please don't, because I don't. It's far from being a bad car. I just had such high hopes for it before starting the test that I was kind of disappointed. I was hoping that it would be the best of all the current model WRC cars that are on the game, but unfortunately it just isn't. Now, that said, it is still one of the most freshman-friendly, as it were, rally cars in the game. It's very easy to just jump in and drive fast. And I would say if you are planning on using this car, I would say be quite selective about what tracks you choose to use it on. For city tracks, it's very good because of especially that short wheelbase and the pure drivability. For dirt tracks, be more selective. Choose tracks which don't require as much high speed, because on the high speed sections you will start to notice that heavy steering coming into play and the lack of top end performance compared to some of the other rally cars. But if you keep it to a track which you never really get above, say, 100 miles per hour, then it will perform very well, because the short wheelbase does allow it to change direction very quickly at low speed. And I would say that is this car's main advantage. It is significantly more compact than most of the other rally cars in the game, which allows it to be more nimble at low speed than most of them anyway, whilst not having to worry about the car sliding out because it has so much grip. The worst point, however, is actually the other end of its handling spectrum, the high-end handling, because the faster you go with this car, the more heavy the steering becomes. Now, you'd think that that would be the case probably with all of the rally cars, but as you're going to see from this series, it's just not the case. And unfortunately, for high-speed handling, this is one of the heaviest of all the rally cars for its high-speed handling and how stiff the handling becomes. Now, if you like that style of handling, you'll probably enjoy the car, but for the majority of people, you probably won't appreciate having to wrestle to keep your car on the right driving line around a corner. So overall, of course, I would suggest, as with all rally cars, that you give it a go. But I would say if you're looking to spend a lot of money on a rally car that is going to win every time for you, perhaps not. Perhaps this isn't the model for you. But as always, I'll put this car's specifications, including its price and power, in the video description, as well as the ratings and lap times that it achieved, if you need to compare that to the other rally cars of the series. And that's it for this episode. So see you next time, and as always, thanks for watching.